Malik Murphy transferring in from Duke to be Oregon State starting quarterback. And given how it went for Riley Leonard last year, this is a really good sign for the Beavers as Riley Leonard led Notre Dame to the national championship game. Malik Murphy at Duke last year led Duke to a really solid season, similar to what Leonard did the year previous. I think Oregon State is in for a really good year. They've built a really solid roster around Murphy as well. So I think they're going to have a really, really good team this year. Start off the year at home against Cal, and this is a team that we were originally pretty high on. Now they don't have Jaden Ott at running back anymore, and that's going to be a big loss for this team, as well as a lot of players transferring after that original video. This is a game that Oregon State definitely should win next year. They should be 1-0 pretty easily.
Following week will be against Fresno State, and Fresno State historically has been one of the better teams in the group of five. They did not have a very productive season last year, only going 6-7, but maybe they still can be a competitive team. It's definitely one team that you don't want to sleep on, especially early on in the season. But Oregon State should be the better team overall with Murphy as their quarterback, along with returning their starting running back in Anthony Hankerson after a very solid season last year, rushing for over 1,000 yards and 15 touchdowns. And with the wide receiver core intact, Malik Murphy will have plenty of weapons to lead him to a victory here before a tough stretch of games, really their toughest stretch of games in back-to-back weeks here, starting with a road trip to Texas Tech.
And this Red Raiders team has made a lot of changes during the offseason. They had the second best transfer portal class in all of college football, not to mention their facilities renovation at the school, completely redoing all of their football facilities, spending millions of dollars. They're bringing back their starting quarterback, Baron Morton. This is a road game for Oregon State, which makes it incredibly difficult. I think that this is where they are going to pick up their first loss. Texas Tech is a team that we are very high on, a potential poorest team in the Big 12 and maybe even for the college football playoffs. Oregon State's going to be good. Malik Murphy's going to be good, but this is a tough road game early in the season against another very good school.
And speaking of tough road games, the following week is their in-state rivalry game against Oregon at Autzen. And Oregon's coming off of an undefeated regular season after winning the Big Ten in their first year as a member. But now they have to reload a little bit with Dylan Gabriel off to the NFL. They have Dante Moore as their starting quarterback going into next year. And there's a couple question marks around him considering he has not been a starting quarterback in a year, and his starting experience was at UCLA, which had some iffy numbers. But I think with Dan Lanning as his head coach and with the amount of weapons they still have at the wide receiver position, especially, that he will be fine defensively. Oregon looks great. I think Oregon State could definitely compete in this game and maybe give the Ducks a scare, especially early on in the season if Dante Moore hasn't figured things out. I do think the home field advantage that the Ducks have is one of the best in the country, and it will get to Malik Murphy in probably his biggest game of his career. And I do think the Beavers will drop two in a row here.
Yeah, it lightens up a little bit after that, though. This Houston game isn't a pushover yet. Uh, Houston's got a really solid team. They're bringing in Connor Weigman, transfer quarterback from Texas A&M, and I think that they are going to be improved from last year. There's a good chance that they can even push for a bowl game this season, but I don't know if they're going to be quite good enough to beat Oregon State on the road. A lot of people thought it was crazy earlier in our Oregon State schedule preview and the Houston schedule preview when we said that Oregon State was going to win this game. I think that that's still the case. Oregon State, in my opinion, is the better team than Houston, and it's not really close in my opinion either. Malik Murphy, better quarterback than Connor Weigman, and just all around, I like this Oregon State team more than I like Houston. So we have Oregon State winning this game.
And I think a lot of the pushback against Oregon State being as good as we think they will is because they went 5-7 last year. And granted, that is not a very good record for a team that is usually pretty competitive, but I do think that they have retooled very well and will have a very solid chance of winning the Pac-2 this year against a Washington State team that has to replace their starting quarterback as well. But they're doing it in-house, and we will get to Washington State later on. The following week is a road trip to Appalachian State, and App State is not going to be that good next year. They fell off a little bit and finished in the bottom of their conference, in the bottom of their division in their conference. But they are 4-1, but they were 4-1 at home last year, so maybe the home field advantage will play a little bit of a factor here. But once again, like we've been saying, Oregon State will be the better team. There's so much returning production from the offense and the defense that there's really going to be no challenge here for the Beavers. They'll move to 4-2 here, and then they have a game against Wake Forest. Wake Forest is probably going to be one of the worst teams in the ACC next season. And they really only have two guys that I would be looking forward to seeing play, and that's Robbie Ashford, who is their transfer quarterback from South Carolina, and their running back who is returning in Damon Claiborne. But outside of those two players, I really don't see the Steven Deacons team being much of a threat to Oregon State. So they will move to 5-2.
Next up is Lafayette, and this is going to be one of the easiest games of the year for Oregon State. Now, this is not Louisiana Lafayette, the FBS team. This is an FCS school. 100% chance of a win here heading into the bye week to move to 6. And then it's their first of two conference games, both against the same team, Washington State. Zebby Eckhouse going to be the starting quarterback for the Cougars. And if you haven't heard that name, you might have by the end of the year. If we continue to follow this pattern of Washington State quarterbacks, Cam Ward ended up going number one overall in the draft, highly sought after transfer. And now John Montier was a highly sought after transfer now at Oklahoma. Zebby Eckhouse could be the next guy. If he is, Washington State has a great chance in this game, but we really don't know much about him yet, so it's tough to say that he's just going to follow after those players because he's at Washington State. There's a chance, but we know a lot more about Malik Murphy and this Oregon State team, especially at home. I trust them in this first matchup more against Washington State.
The next week is going to be against Sam Houston, and Sam Houston was very good last season in their first year as an FBS team. Now, though, I don't think they're going to be that good. They've lost a lot of their production from last season to the transfer portal, and I do not think a 10-3 season is in the cards for them. I do not see them being able to compete with Oregon State, especially with it being a road game for the Bearcats. Oregon State will move to 8-2 here. And then they have a road trip against Tulsa. Tulsa was not very good last season either. Once again, I just think Oregon State is the more talented team here. Whatever Tulsa may have, Oregon State will have plenty of guys to handle the weapons that Tulsa may have. Going 3-9 last season, there's just really no comparison. Beavers will move to 9-2 before their last bye week for their final game, which is that away game against Washington State. And, the saying goes that it's hard to beat a team twice. Usually, once you play a team the first time, the coaches, the players are going to start figuring out like little cues, little bits of information that can lead you to outsmarting the team the second time around. If you want to look for examples last season, you could look at Ohio State when they played Oregon the first time at Autzen, lost that game, then blew them out in the Rose Bowl. Stuff like that can happen. I really don't see it happening in this one. It's going to be really difficult to say Oregon State will go 2-0 against Washington State next year, but I just think there's so much more talent, and we know for sure what we're getting out of Oregon State, particularly out of Malik Murphy, that I feel confident in saying that the Beavers can go 2-0 against Washington State next season. So they will end the season 10-2, but Jonah's going to mention it when we get to the next slide. This really can be either 10-2 or 9-3, depending on how you think about this kind of game. But I once again just think Oregon State is the better team, regardless of the situation.
Yeah, even if Washington State does win that second game, though, 9-3 is a really good season. for Oregon State. And I mean, better than what we predicted originally, which got some pushback from people like we were talking about earlier. I still think this is a really good team, and we aren't going to let that change our minds. So our way too early prediction was 7.3 wins, had them going 8-4. Now it's up to 8.5 projected wins, with the ceiling being 10-2, which is what we predicted. The floor is 6-6, though. This is just, I mean, if Malik Murphy completely falls apart in a new offense and all of that stuff, I just don't really see that happening. I think he's going to do a really, really solid job. But at this prediction of 10-2, there's another thing that could potentially be in the cards for Oregon State. No conference championship game, which doesn't help them out, but they might be in consideration for an at-large bid into the college football playoffs if Texas Tech and Oregon also have great seasons, and those are their only two losses. This is a team that could have their name up there, however unlikely it may be. It would be kind of similar to Indiana, just with one more loss because they're going to have a very weak schedule as far as wins go and lost to the only two good teams that they played. I don't think get in, but they certainly can get in if a lot of things go their way. So thank you guys for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in our next video.